In a mansion illuminated by golden chandeliers, an elegant party turns into a scene of public humiliation that no one dares to stop. A silent wife is pushed to her limits when an intruder appears to take everything she believes she has lost. But at the moment when the shame becomes unbearable, an unexpected revelation turns the night upside down and exposes who truly holds power in that house. And what happens next changes the fate of everyone present forever. Before you hear this gripping story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories full of shocking twists. The night promised to be a spectacle of restrained elegance, a ballet of polished smiles and whispered conversations, set to the gentle melody of a string quartet. In the vast Sterling family mansion, every detail was a testament to the tradition and power the family had flaunted for generations. The guests, prominent figures in high society, circulated through the richly decorated halls, champagne flutes glittering under the crystal chandeliers. It was a celebration, one of many, where discretion was the golden rule and any deviation, a potential scandal. At the center of this universe of appearances was Sophia, the hostess. Reserved by nature, she moved with an almost imperceptible grace, ensuring everything was in perfect order. Her dress, a classic pastel-colored model, reflected her personality, elegant but not attention-seeking. Sophia had always preferred the background, the silence of the library, the quiet of the garden over the social buzz. Married to Richard, the sterling heir, she had adapted to the life of luxury and social expectations, but never truly felt part of that world of facades. Her deep brown eyes carried a subtle melancholy, a well-kept secret behind a polite smile. Richard, on the other hand, was her opposite. Extroverted, charming, and with an air of innate superiority, he moved among the guests like a king in his domain. His laughter echoed through the halls, and his grand gestures drew gazes. He was the center of attention, and he loved it. Sophia often felt like a shadow by his side, a decorative piece in his grandiose life. Their relationship, once marked by an overwhelming passion, had transformed into a routine of convenience and silence. The harmony of the evening, however, was about to be shattered. A murmur began to spread, a whisper that grew like a wave. All eyes turned to the main entrance where a figure appeared, defying all conventions. It was Veronica. Her red dress, a vibrant and provocative shade, seemed to scream amidst the sober tones of the other guests. She walked with an almost insolent confidence, her hips swaying in a calculated rhythm, as if the mansion were her private stage. Each step echoed through the hall, drawing curious and shocked stares. Veronica wasn't a guest, she was a statement, Richard's mistress, appearing as if she were a legitimate part of the celebration, with the certainty of someone who believed she had conquered not only another woman's husband, but also the wife's place. Sophia felt the air thin in her lungs. The smile on her lips faltered, and the champagne flute in her hands trembled slightly. Veronica's presence was a direct blow, a public humiliation that struck her at her core. She had always known about the other woman's existence, but seeing her there so brazenly was different. It was the materialization of her worst fears, the confirmation of her invisibility. Veronica, with a victorious smile on her red-painted lips, advanced toward Sophia. Her piercing green eyes shone with a restrained malice. She approached with a clear, almost palpable intention to humiliate. A discreet shove, almost imperceptible to the less attentive, threw Sophia off balance. "Watch it, darling," Veronica murmured, her voice sweet and venomous. "You seem a little clumsy today. Or maybe it's the excitement of having your husband so busy." She laughed, a sharp sound that pierced the momentary silence. Then, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, she added, "Richard was just telling me how much he wanted to be by my side tonight. He feels so understood with me, you know, unlike certain people who only know how to complain." The height of the provocation came in a swift, calculated move. Veronica tugged on the sleeve of Sophia's dress with unnecessary force. The crystal glass in Sophia's hands slipped, falling to the floor with a sharp crack. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the hall, causing an immediate and awkward silence. All eyes turned to the two women. Veronica, feigning innocence, widened her eyes. "Oh my God, What a disaster! Sophia, you're so clumsy and emotionally unstable. Look what you've done. The guests exchanged shocked glances, some with pity, others with cruel amusement. Sophia felt her face burn. Veronica's words were like knives, and the silence of the guests an unbearable weight. She sought Richard's gaze, looking for support, a defense, anything to get her out of that humiliating situation. But Richard, to her horror, only reinforced the cruelty. He approached, his face twisted in a look of disapproval. "Sophia, please. What a ridiculous scene. You're so fragile, so dramatic, incapable of behaving in public. I can't believe you're doing this again." He gestured angrily. "If you can't control yourself, I'll have you thrown out of this mansion. In front of everyone, you're a disposable problem." Richard's words were a final blow. Sophia felt crushed, reduced to nothing. She tried to explain, tried to say it wasn't her fault, that Veronica had provoked her, but her every word was drowned out by the cruel union of her husband and his mistress. The woman who should have been protected in that house, the hostess, the wife, found herself alone, exposed and diminished before a silent audience. The pain was excruciating, but in the midst of it, something changed. A flame, long dormant, ignited in her chest. She lifted her head, her brown eyes fixed on Richard, then on Veronica. "I'm not leaving." Her voice, once trembling, now carried a surprising firmness. "This is my house." It was at that exact moment that strong, determined footsteps echoed down the main staircase. An even deeper silence fell over the hall. All eyes turned to the imposing figure descending the steps. It was Eleanor Sterling, the family matriarch, a woman of unquestionable presence, respected and feared in equal measure. Her impeccably styled white hair framed a face marked by age and authority. Her blue eyes, as sharp as a hawk's, quickly analyzed the scene, the shattered crystal on the floor, a shaken Sophia, an arrogant Richard, Veronica in her triumphant pose. Eleanor said nothing. Her expression was one of contained but visible fury. She advanced through the hall, her stride firm and determined. She stopped in front of Richard and, without hesitation, delivered a sharp, resounding slap across her son's face. The sound echoed through the hall, making the guests hold their breath. Richard staggered, his hand to his face, shock written all over it. Then Eleanor turned to Veronica and, with the same force and precision, struck the mistress. Veronica let out a small cry, her hand on her cheek, her eyes wide with disbelief. When she finally spoke, Eleanor's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade, cold and unforgiving. "The only disgrace here is the behavior of you two." But the biggest shock was yet to come. Eleanor turned to the guests, her voice echoing with unquestionable authority. "Allow me to clarify a few things. This mansion, the grounds surrounding it, and the entire legacy of the Sterling family, all of it was legally transferred into Sophia's name 2 years ago." A murmur of astonishment rippled through the hall. My father, Richard's grandfather, a man of vision and wisdom, was wary of my grandson's irresponsibility and lack of character. He decided to protect the family's assets, and in an act of profound trust, he entrusted Sophia to preserve it. In other words, Sophia is not just Richard's wife. She is the true owner of this mansion. The revelation made the mistress turn pale. The vibrant red of her dress seemed to fade in the face of the truth. She tried to justify herself, stammering something about love and deceit, but Eleanor silenced her immediately with an icy glare. "Never set foot on this property again. If you do, you will face the legal consequences." Humiliated, her pride destroyed, Veronica ran out of the hall, her hurried steps echoing in the silence. Richard, in desperation, tried to regain control of the situation, but there was no power left in his words. His mother faced him with a severity he had never seen. "You will not stay in this mansion tonight, Richard, and you may only return with Sophia's express permission. She is the true authority in this home, and you will do as she says." The guests, once passive and curious, now approached Sophia, some to comfort her, others to congratulate her on her courage and her new position. For the first time, Sophia saw the mansion not as the setting of her submission and humiliation, but as a space that truly belonged to her, not just by documents, but by emotional right. The night that began with the deepest humiliation ended with an overwhelming liberation. Richard fell from his pedestal, the mistress was expelled, and the truth came to light. The true owner of the mansion had always been Sophia, and now she was also reclaiming dominion over her own life. She didn't just get her place back, she got herself back. The buzz in the hall transformed into a cacophony of voices, all directed at Sophia. Hands reached out to shake hers, words of admiration and solidarity rained down on her. It was a complete reversal of the scene from minutes before, when she was the target of humiliation. Now she was the unexpected hero, the rightful owner, the woman who had risen from the ashes. Sophia, still stunned by the events, felt a mix of euphoria and exhaustion. The adrenaline that had driven her to confront Richard and Veronica began to fade, leaving her with a sense of emptiness and a pang of disbelief. Eleanor, observing the scene with quiet satisfaction, approached her daughter-in-law. Her eyes, once icy, now held a glint of pride and affection. "Sophia, my dear," she said, her voice softer but still laden with authority. "You were magnificent. My father would be proud." She held Sophia's hand firmly. "Now it's time for you to take your place. This house is yours, and with it, the responsibility to honor the sterling legacy." Sophia looked at the matriarch, a wave of gratitude washing over her. "Eleanor, I don't know what to say. I had no idea." The matriarch smiled, a rare and genuine smile. "My father was a shrewd man. He saw in you the strength and integrity that Richard lacked. He knew you would be the perfect guardian for all of this." She made a sweeping gesture with her hand, indicating the mansion and all it represented. "He always said that true power lies not in the name but in character." Meanwhile, Richard, still dazed from the slap and the revelation, watched the scene from afar. The humiliation was unbearable. He, the heir, the only son, the future of the family, had been stripped of everything, publicly by his own mother and his wife. Rage simmered in his chest, mixed with a growing desperation. He tried to approach Eleanor but was intercepted by one of the family's security guards, who discreetly escorted him out of the hall under the matriarch's watchful eye. The guests, sensing the show was over, began to disperse, some with curious glances, others with a newfound respect for Sophia. The soft music of the string quartet resumed, but the party's atmosphere had irrevocably changed. The air was charged with a new energy, a promise of change. Sophia, now alone with Eleanor, felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "But Eleanor, I don't know how to manage all this. I've never been involved in the family business." The matriarch squeezed her hand again. "And you don't have to be, my dear. For that, we have competent managers. Your role is to be the head, the moral compass. My father left everything very well organized. You will have all the support you need, and I will be here to guide you, as I always have been." A sudden thought struck Sophia. "And Richard, what will become of him?" Eleanor sighed, her expression hardening slightly. "Richard will have to learn to live with the consequences of his choices. He has an allowance, enough to live comfortably, but without the privileges and power he so abused. He will have to prove he is worthy of anything more, and that, my dear, will depend entirely on you." Sophia looked around at the halls that now belonged to her. The mansion, once a symbol of her gilded cage, now seemed like a castle to be conquered. A new strength welled up inside her. She was no longer the quiet, submissive Sophia. The woman who had held her head high and refused to leave, the woman who had been humiliated and would rise again, was here. The night that began with the deepest humiliation had indeed ended with liberation. But Sophia knew the real battle was just beginning. Liberation was only the first step. Rebuilding her life, her identity, and managing an empire she never knew she possessed would be the next challenges. The matriarch, sensing the depth of Sophia's thoughts, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, my dear. You have the strength you need, and I will be by your side. Always." Sophia nodded, a small smile appearing on her lips. For the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope, of a future where she would be the protagonist of her own story. The Sterling mansion was now her kingdom, and she was ready to rule. Sophia's first morning as the true matriarch of the Sterling mansion dawned with a different light. The sun, which once seemed only to illuminate her routine of submission, now radiated a promise of new beginnings. She woke up early, even before the first rays of sun entered her room, and felt an energy she hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't just the absence of the weight of humiliation, but the presence of a renewed purpose. When she went down for breakfast, she found Eleanor already at the table, reading the newspaper with the same imposing posture as always. The matriarch looked up and smiled, a smile that to Sophia seemed to carry a silent approval. "Good morning, Sophia. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years, Eleanor," Sophia replied, feeling the truth in her words. She sat across from the matriarch, and for the first time she didn't feel the pressure of being just Richard's wife, but the owner of the house. "Excellent, we have a lot to do," Eleanor said, folding the newspaper and setting it aside. "The first step is to organize the house. I don't just mean cleaning, but the structure. You need to know every employee, every corner of this property. And more importantly, you need everyone to know who the real authority is now." Sophia nodded, absorbing every word. "I was thinking about that. I want to talk to the staff with the managers. I want to understand how everything works." "Perfect," Eleanor approved. "We'll start with a meeting with Mr. Miller, the family attorney, and Mr. Davis, the general manager of the properties. They are trustworthy men, loyal to the family, and above all to justice. They were the ones responsible for executing my father's plan." The mention of Richard's grandfather sparked a curiosity in Sophia. "Eleanor, why did Richard's grandfather do this? Why did he distrust his own grandson so much that he passed everything to my name?" Eleanor sighed, a look of veiled sadness in her eyes. "My father, the patriarch Horace Sterling, was a man of unshakable principles. He built this empire with sweat and honesty. He always saw in Richard an inclination for superficiality, for easy pleasure, for irresponsibility. Richard was never interested in the family business, only in the benefits it could provide." She paused, her eyes fixed on a distant point. "Horace tried in every way to guide Richard, to teach him the value of work and responsibility. But Richard was always stubborn, blinded by his own arrogance." "And me?" Sophia asked, hesitant. "What did he see in me?" "He saw in you integrity, discretion, the capacity for sacrifice. He saw that, despite your apparent fragility, you possessed an unshakable inner strength. He realized that you were the only person capable of protecting the family's legacy from Richard. He knew that you, Sophia, were the guardian he needed." Eleanor looked at Sophia with an intensity that made her feel deeply honored. "He confided in me that, even before you married Richard, he was already watching you. He saw in you the soul of a true Sterling, even without the blood." The revelation moved Sophia. Knowing that she had been chosen, not by chance but by merit by such a respected man, gave her a new layer of confidence. "I will do my best to honor his memory, Eleanor." "I know you will," the matriarch replied, a warm smile on her face. "Now, about Richard. He tried to contact you this morning. I stopped him, of course. He's furious, but also desperate. He can't conceive of the idea of not being in control." "And Veronica?" Sophia asked, feeling a chill at the mention of the name. "Veronica is gone. I don't know where, nor do I care. She is no longer a problem. But Richard, he is your husband, Sophia. And although he has lost control of the fortune, he still has a last name. And an explosive temper," Eleanor warned her. "You will need to be firm with him. Don't give in to emotional blackmail. He will try everything to reverse the situation." Sophia took a deep breath. She knew the path wouldn't be easy. The liberation of the previous night was just the prelude to a complex journey. But for the first time, she felt ready to face it. The mansion, once a stage for her humiliation, was now her battlefield, and she was determined to win. The meeting with Mr. Miller and Mr. Davis was Sophia's first concrete step toward taking the reins of her new destiny. Mr. Miller, a middle-aged man with thin glasses and a shrewd gaze, explained the legal details of the asset transfer. Mr. Davis, an older gentleman with a serious demeanor and a calm voice, detailed the complexity of managing the properties. Sophia listened intently, asking pointed questions, absorbing every piece of information like a sponge. She was surprised by her own ability to understand and by the genuine interest she felt in these matters that, until then, were completely foreign to her. Eleanor watched her daughter-in-law with a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. "As I said, my father was a shrewd man," she commented, addressing the two men. "Sophia has the intelligence and the grit that Richard never had." Mr. Miller nodded. "Indeed, Mrs. Sterling." The patriarch Horace foresaw this situation. He left a series of clauses and safeguards to ensure the assets would be protected, regardless of Richard's actions. The transfer to Sophia was the centerpiece of that plan. "And what happens if Richard tries to contest it?" Sophia asked, her voice firm. "He can try, but he won't succeed," Mr. Miller replied. "The documents are irrefutable. Everything was done in the strictest legality, with the consent and signature of Horace Sterling, and witnessed by myself and other renowned attorneys. Richard signed a waiver of his inheritance while his grandfather was alive, in exchange for a lifetime allowance on the condition that the assets be managed by someone his grandfather trusted. That person, as we know, is you, Sophia." The revelation of Richard's inheritance waiver shocked Sophia. He had signed his own sentence without knowing it. The irony of the situation was almost palpable. While Sophia delved into the details of management and legal aspects, Richard, expelled from his own home, was in a luxury hotel stewing in his fury and humiliation. He had tried to call Sophia countless times, but she didn't answer. His messages, filled with threats and pleas, remained unanswered. The reality of his new situation was beginning to sink in, and desperation mixed with his anger. "That little woman, that bookworm, how dare she do this to me?" he yelled at the walls of the room, throwing a vase of flowers to the floor. "I'm a Sterling, I'm the heir, she can't take what's mine." His first instinct was to look for Veronica, but she had disappeared without a trace. Calls to her cell phone went to voicemail. The mistress, whom he thought he had in his grasp, had vanished, taking with her not only the passion, but also the illusion of a future by his side. It dawned on him. Veronica was only interested in what he represented, in what he possessed, and now that he possessed nothing, she had abandoned him. Richard then called his friends, seeking support and advice, but most of them, upon learning of the situation, dodged him. Society was cruel, and the fall of a Sterling was a spectacle to be watched from a distance, not to be shared. He realized that his network of contacts was as superficial as his relationships. Desperate, he decided he needed a lawyer, not to contest the inheritance, as Mr. Miller had been very clear about the impossibility of that, but to try to negotiate with Sophia. He needed money, access to the mansion, his life back. He couldn't live on an allowance, no matter how generous. He needed the power, the status, the freedom to spend without limits. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Sophia spent the day exploring every room, every garden, every detail of the property that was now hers. She talked with the staff, listened to their stories, their concerns. She discovered that many of them had a genuine affection for Eleanor and the patriarch Horace, and a deep dislike for Richard. Their loyalty, she realized, was a valuable asset. At the end of the day, exhausted but with a sense of accomplishment, Sophia sat in the library, the place that had always been her refuge. She leafed through some old books, feeling the texture of the paper, the smell of history. There she found a dusty photo album. Opening it, she came across images of a young Horace Sterling, next to a smiling woman with bright eyes and a gentle smile. It was Richard's grandmother, the first matriarch of the family. In one of the photos, Horace was holding a baby, and the caption read, "My little Richard, the hope of the family." The irony of that caption, in light of recent events, was almost painful. Sophia closed the album, a new determination in her eyes. She would not only be the guardian of the assets, but also the guardian of the memory and values that Horace Sterling had built. She would do justice to the family's legacy, and Richard somehow would have to fit into this new reality. What do you think Sophia will discover about the Sterling family's past that will help her better understand Horace's plan? The days that followed were of intense immersion for Sophia. She dedicated herself to understanding every aspect of the vast sterling fortune, from the rural estates to the stocks in major corporations. Mr. Miller and Mr. Davis became her mentors, guiding her through a labyrinth of documents, balance sheets, and investment strategies. Sophia, who once saw herself as a mere spectator of life, discovered in herself a sharp mind for business, an analytical ability, and an intuition that surprised even the experienced managers. Eleanor, for her part, took on the role of counselor and guardian of the family history. She spent hours with Sophia, telling her about the journey of Horace Sterling, the patriarch who built the empire from nothing. "My father was a visionary, Sophia," Eleanor would say, as the two had tea on the veranda overlooking the gardens. "He didn't just care about money, but about the impact his businesses had on people's lives. He built schools, hospitals, invested in social projects. He believed that wealth was a tool for good, not an end in itself." Sophia listened intently, absorbing every detail. She realized that Horace's plan was not just to protect the assets from Richard, but to ensure that the family's values were perpetuated. The mansion, the lands, the companies, all of it was a legacy of social responsibility, not just economic power. While Sophia delved into the Sterling universe, Richard, in his self-imposed exile at the hotel, desperately tried to reverse his situation. He hired a lawyer, a young, ambitious, and inexperienced man who promised miracles. However, after a few weeks of research and failed attempts to find loopholes in the documents, the lawyer had to admit to Richard that the situation was irreversible. "Mr. Sterling, the documents are impeccable. Your grandfather foresaw every move. The inheritance waiver is legally valid, and the transfer to your wife is unquestionable. There's nothing we can do." The news hit Richard like a lightning bolt. He fired the lawyer on the spot, feeling betrayed and humiliated once again. The anger turned to desperation, and the desperation to a bitter resignation. He started drinking more, spending his nights in bars, wasting his allowance on gambling and dubious company. The life of luxury he had always known was slipping away, and he didn't know how to cope with the loss. One day, while Sophia was reviewing some old documents in the library, she found a dusty box hidden behind a bookshelf. Inside there were letters, diaries, and old photographs. They were the personal belongings of Horace Sterling. Among the papers, Sophia found a leather-bound diary with the patriarch's elegant handwriting. Curious, she began to read. The first pages spoke of Horace's youth, his struggle to build his empire, his dreams, and his ambitions. But as Sophia read on, she encountered deeper reflections on family, on love, and on disappointment. In one entry, dated a few years before his death, Horace wrote about Richard. "My grandson, Richard, he is a good boy, but so naive, so easily influenced. He doesn't understand the weight of the Sterling name, the responsibility it carries. He sees only the glitter, the power, but not the essence. I'm afraid he will destroy everything I've built, not out of malice, but out of sheer irresponsibility. He needs someone to guide him, to protect him from himself, someone who has the strength and wisdom to keep the legacy intact." In another entry, Horace wrote about Sophia. Sophia, Richard's wife, a quiet young woman, of few words, but with a gaze that reveals a rare depth of soul. She observes, she learns, she absorbs. She has the grit that Richard lacks. I see her tending to the gardens, reading in the library, always in her corner, but always attentive. She has the capacity to love, to care, to protect. She will be the perfect guardian for my legacy. She will be the true matriarch. Sophia felt a lump in her throat. Horace's words were a testament to his faith in her, a trust she never knew she had. He had seen her, understood her, chosen her. It wasn't just a matter of protecting the assets, but of protecting the soul of the family. Next to the diary, Sophia found a sealed letter addressed to her. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. The handwriting was the same as in the diary. "My dear Sophia, if you are reading this letter, it means my plan has succeeded. It means you have taken your rightful place. I know this responsibility may seem overwhelming, but trust me, you are the right person for it. Richard, unfortunately, was never up to the sterling name. He is a good boy, but weak of character, easily manipulated. I love him, but I cannot allow him to destroy what I spent a lifetime building. I trust you, Sophia, to be the guardian of our legacy, to uphold the values I have always defended: honesty, integrity, social responsibility, and to guide Richard if he ever proves himself worthy of being guided. This mansion is more than bricks and mortar. It is the heart of our family. Take good care of it, and it will take care of you. With all my affection and trust, Horace Sterling. Tears streamed down Sophia's face. Horace's letter was not just a revelation, but a blessing, a confirmation of her purpose. She was not just the owner of the mansion. She was the heir to a legacy, the guardian of a history, and she was ready to take on that responsibility with all her strength and determination. Horace Sterling's letter became a beacon for Sophia. She reread it constantly, seeking in the patriarch's words the strength and wisdom for the challenges that lay ahead. Each day, Sophia felt more connected to the family's legacy, and the mansion, once a place of oppression, transformed into a sanctuary of purpose. She began to implement Horace's ideas, investing in social projects in neighboring communities, renovating schools and hospitals that bore the Sterling name. Her natural discretion, once seen as a weakness, was now perceived as a virtue, allowing her to work behind the scenes, building bridges and strengthening ties. Eleanor watched Sophia's flourishing with quiet pride. "My father would be ecstatic," she commented to Mr. Miller. "Sophia has not only inherited the fortune, but also the spirit of the Sterlings." While Sophia solidified her position as the new matriarch, Richard sank deeper into his own misery. The allowance, which once seemed generous, now barely covered his extravagant spending and growing vices. He had lost the respect of his old friends, who now viewed him with pity or contempt. Loneliness was his only companion, and alcohol his refuge. One day, Richard, in a fit of desperation, decided to go to the mansion. He needed to talk to Sophia, to beg, to demand, anything that could reverse his situation. He showed up at the gate but was stopped by the security guards. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richard," one of them said in a respectful but firm tone. "Mrs. Sophia gave express orders that you can only enter with her permission." The humiliation of being barred from his own home by his own staff was a harsh blow for Richard. He tried to argue, to threaten, but the guards remained unshakable. He was forced to call Sophia, something he had avoided at all costs. Sophia answered the phone, her voice calm and controlled. "Richard, what do you want?" "Sophia, I need to get in. This is my house. You can't stop me." His voice was choked, a mixture of anger and desperation. "This is not your house anymore, Richard. It's mine, and you will only enter here if I allow it, and right now I don't. You're agitated. This is not the time for us to talk." "But I need money, Sophia. I'm broke. The allowance isn't enough," Sophia sighed. "The allowance is more than enough for a decent life, Richard. If you're spending it irresponsibly, that's your problem. I am not your enabler." "Are you abandoning me, Sophia? After everything we've been through, are you going to leave me on the street?" "I'm not abandoning you, Richard. I'm just doing what's right. You need to face the consequences of your choices. When you're sober and willing to have a civilized conversation, call me. Until then, there's nothing I can do for you." Sophia hung up the phone, feeling a tightness in her chest. It wasn't easy to be so tough on him, but she knew it was necessary. Horace had entrusted her with the task of guiding Richard, and that meant not giving in to his weaknesses. The next day, Richard, calmer and with a hangover weighing on his head, called again. This time his voice was softer, almost pleading. "Sophia, please, I need to talk to you. I'm willing to listen. I need help." Sophia hesitated for a moment. She knew it was a risk, but also an opportunity. "All right, Richard. Come to the mansion tomorrow at 10 in the morning. But come alone and come sober, and be prepared to hear some truths." Richard agreed, hope igniting in his chest. He didn't know what to expect, but anything was better than the loneliness and despair that consumed him. The next day, Richard appeared at the mansion promptly at 10. He was visibly worn down, but sober. Sophia received him in the library, the same place where she had found Horace's letter. Eleanor was present, sitting in an armchair, observing the scene with her usual imposing posture. "Richard," Sophia began, her voice calm but firm, "we need to talk about your future, and about the future of this family." Richard nodded, his eyes downcast. "I know, Sophia. I messed up. I was a fool. I don't know what to do." "The first step is to acknowledge your mistakes," Sophia said. "The second is to be willing to change them. Your grandfather Horace always worried about you. He left this letter for me and I want you to read it." Sophia handed Richard Horace's letter. He took it with trembling hands and began to read. As his eyes scanned his grandfather's words, the expression on his face changed. Anger gave way to sadness, sadness to shame, and shame to a deep emotion. Tears streamed down his face. He cared about me," Richard murmured, his voice choked. "He loved me." "He loved you, Richard," Eleanor said, her voice soft, "but he also loved the legacy he built, and he knew you weren't ready to carry it." Sophia looked at Richard, seeing in him no longer the arrogant and irresponsible man, but a broken man in search of redemption. "Richard, I don't want to see you destroyed. I want you to get back on your feet, but that will depend on you. I'm willing to help you, to guide you, but you have to want to be helped." Richard looked up, meeting Sophia's gaze. There was a new light in his eyes, a spark of hope. "I do, Sophia. I want to change. I want to be worthy of the sterling name. I want to be worthy of you." Sophia knew the road would be long and arduous, but for the first time she saw a real chance of redemption for Richard. The seed of change had been planted. The conversation in the library marked a turning point. Richard, for the first time in a long while, seemed genuinely willing to listen and reflect. His grandfather Horace's letter had been a direct hit to his armor of arrogance, revealing the love and concern the patriarch held for him, despite his flaws. The tears that streamed down his face were not just of sadness, but of a painful recognition of his mistakes. "I want to change, Sophia, I really do," Richard repeated, his voice still choked. "But I don't know where to start. I've lost my way." Sophia glanced at Eleanor, who gave a subtle nod. "The first step, Richard, is admitting you need help," Sophia said, her voice gentle but firm. "And the second is accepting that help. You need a purpose, something to keep you busy, to make you feel useful." Eleanor intervened. "Your grandfather always believed in work as a form of redemption. He started from scratch, Richard. He inherited nothing. He built everything with his own hands and the strength of his character." Richard lowered his head. "I know. I've always been a waste, a parasite." "Don't say that," Sophia chided gently. "You have potential, Richard. You just need to channel it into something constructive. I have an idea." Sophia explained to Richard about the social projects she was developing, inspired by Horace's ideals. "We're renovating an old family property, Hope Ranch, to turn it into a vocational training center for underprivileged youth in the area. It's an ambitious project that requires a lot of dedication and supervision. I need someone I can trust to manage the construction, to deal with suppliers, the crew, the bureaucracy, someone who's willing to roll up their sleeves and really work." Richard looked at her, surprised. You want me to do that?" "Yes," Sophia replied. "It's an opportunity for you to prove to yourself and to everyone that you're capable of more than just spending money. It's a chance to build something, to leave a positive legacy, just like your grandfather did." Eleanor added, "And it's a chance for you to learn the value of work, Richard, to understand what it means to build something with sweat and dedication. Your grandfather always said that a man's true worth isn't in what he owns, but in what he builds." Richard hesitated for a moment. The idea of manual labor, of dealing with budgets and timelines, was completely foreign to his nature. But the prospect of having a purpose, of regaining the respect of Sophia and his mother, was tempting. I accept," he said, his voice a little stronger. "I'll do it. I'll prove I can." Sophia smiled, a genuine and encouraging smile. "Excellent. Mr. Davis, will accompany you for the first few days so you can get familiar with the project. He's an experienced man and can teach you a lot." In the following days, Richard threw himself into the Hope Ranch project. He started reluctantly, it's true, but with each day, with each challenge overcome, he felt a satisfaction that money and fleeting pleasures had never given him. He learned to deal with the workers, to negotiate with suppliers, to solve unexpected problems. His hands, once accustomed only to holding champagne flutes, were now calloused and dirty with soil and cement. Sophia visited him regularly at the ranch, observing his progress. She saw a different Richard, more focused, more humble, more human. Their conversations, once laden with resentment, were now about the progress of the construction, about the challenges and small victories. Slowly, the bridge between them began to be rebuilt. Eleanor also made her visits, always with a critical eye, but with a glint of approval. "You're doing well, Richard," she said one day, as she watched her son supervise the installation of a roof. "Your grandfather would be proud." Those words, coming from his mother, meant more to Richard than any fortune. He was finally beginning to find his own way, to build his own legacy. Hope Ranch wasn't just a social project, it was the project of his own redemption. However, life, like a good soap opera, always has its twists. While Richard dedicated himself to his new life, a shadow from the past began to stir on the outskirts of the city. Veronica, the expelled mistress, had not completely disappeared. She was watching, waiting for the right moment to resurface and perhaps try to reclaim what she believed she had lost. While Richard dedicated himself body and soul to Hope Ranch, turning the construction site into a symbol of his own rebuilding, Sophia continued to solidify her position as the true matriarch of the Sterlings. She not only managed the vast empire with intelligence and insight, but also continued Horace's social projects, expanding and adapting them to current needs. The mansion, once a place of silence and melancholy for her, now buzzed with the energy of meetings, planning, and the constant presence of Eleanor, who had become her most faithful ally and advisor. The relationship between Sophia and Richard, though still far from a traditional marriage, had transformed. There was a mutual respect, a silent admiration for each other's efforts. Sophia's visits to Hope Ranch were moments of genuine exchange, where Richard shared the project's challenges and small victories, and Sophia listened attentively, offering practical advice and encouragement. He still lived in a rented apartment, but the idea of returning to the mansion, once an unquestionable right, now seemed like something to be earned, deserved. However, their newfound peace was about to be shattered. Veronica, the woman in red who had set the Sterling party ablaze, had not completely disappeared. She was in the city, living in a small apartment, watching from afar, nursing her anger and her desire for revenge. The public humiliation she had suffered at the mansion, Eleanor's slaps, the summary expulsion, all of it had turned into a poison that corroded her soul. Veronica had tried to approach Richard in the early days of his exile, but he had rejected her, blaming her for his downfall. "You ruined me, Veronica. Because of you, I lost everything." Richard's words, uttered in a fit of rage, had deeply wounded Veronica's pride, turning her hurt self-esteem into a burning desire for retribution. She spent her days reading the society columns, the newspapers looking for any news about the Sterlings. And the news was plentiful. Sophia, the bookworm, was being praised for her management, her social projects, her quiet elegance. Richard, the prodigal heir, was being rehabilitated, praised for his work at Hope Ranch. With every compliment, every positive news story, Veronica's anger grew. She couldn't stand the idea of them thriving while she withered. Veronica began to hatch a plan. She knew she couldn't attack Sophia directly, as the matriarch was protected by Eleanor and a legion of lawyers. But Richard was the weak link. He was the man she had loved, the man who had rejected her. And she knew a secret that could shake the foundations of the Sterling family and, perhaps, bring Richard back to her. The secret wasn't about money or business, but about lineage, about the purity of the Sterling blood, something Eleanor prized above all else. Veronica had discovered by chance during her days of intimacy with Richard a series of old letters hidden in a chest in his room, letters that revealed a story of forbidden love, an illegitimate son, and a web of silence and secrets that went back decades. She knew that revealing this secret would not only destabilize the family but also hit Eleanor where she was most vulnerable, the honor and reputation of the Sterlings. And in doing so, she hoped to create chaos that would allow her to reinsert herself into Richard's life, perhaps as the only person who could help him navigate the storm. Veronica began to approach people who worked at the mansion, older employees who might have some information, some clue that would confirm her suspicions. She used her charm, her beauty, and the promise of money to extract information. And slowly, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. She discovered that the illegitimate son, a man named Daniel, had been raised away from the family, but never completely forgotten. He was an artist, a sculptor, who lived a simple life, oblivious to the fortune and dramas of the Sterlings. Veronica saw Daniel as the key to her revenge. She didn't want the money. She didn't want the mansion. She wanted to see the Sterling family in ruins and Richard on his knees, begging for her forgiveness. With the information in hand, Veronica decided it was time to act. She knew the family's next major social gathering would be the perfect moment to drop her bomb. A charity event organized by Sophia to celebrate the completion of the first phase of Hope Ranch. It would be the perfect occasion to expose the secret, to tarnish the Sterling name, and to destroy the peace that Sophia and Richard had built. The news of the completion of the first phase of Hope Ranch was met with enthusiasm by society. Sophia, with Eleanor's support, organized a charity event at the mansion to celebrate the achievement and raise funds for the project's next stages. It was to be a gala night, attended by important figures from politics, business, and philanthropy. Richard, visibly thinner but with a renewed sparkle in his eyes, would co-host alongside Sophia, a living testament to his redemption. The mansion was stunning. Fresh flowers adorned every corner, soft music filled the air, and the guests, in their formal attire, circulated through the halls, praising Sophia's initiative and Richard's work. The atmosphere was one of celebration and optimism. However, behind the scenes, Veronica was preparing for her big moment. She had managed to get an invitation through an old contact, a socialite, who couldn't resist the temptation of having the woman in red back on the scene. Veronica looked impeccable in an elegant black dress, but with a daring neckline that did not go unnoticed. Her eyes, however, did not shine with joy, but with a cold, calculating determination. She watched Sophia and Richard side by side, receiving compliments. The image of harmony and success disgusted her. "They don't deserve this happiness," she thought, clutching the small purse in her hands, where she kept the proof of her secret. Veronica waited for the right moment, Sophia's speech, in which she would thank everyone and talk about the importance of the project, would be the perfect opportunity. When Sophia took the small stage set up in the main hall, everyone's attention turned to her. Richard stood by her side, a proud smile on his face. Sophia began to speak, her voice clear and emotional, about the transformation of Hope Ranch and implicitly about Richard's transformation. She praised her husband's tireless work, the team's dedication, and Horace Sterling's vision. The audience applauded, moved. It was then that Veronica acted. She approached the stage, a glass of champagne in hand, and in a swift, rehearsed move outtripped, spilling the drink on one of the audio cables. A loud screech and a brief power cut silenced the hall. In the momentary chaos, Veronica took the opportunity to approach Sophia. "Congratulations, Sophia," she said, with a fake smile. "You've really outdone yourself. But is the Sterling family as perfect as you make it seem?" Sophia stared at her, surprised and annoyed. "Veronica, what are you doing here?" "Just sharing a little truth," Veronica replied, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "A truth that the matriarch, Eleanor, has kept under lock and key for decades. A truth about the Sterling bloodline." Eleanor, who was in the front row, felt a chill. Her eyes narrowed and she stood up, walking toward the stage. "Veronica, stop this right now." But Veronica was not intimidated. She pulled a yellowed envelope from her purse and held it up for all to see. "This is a secret that could shake the foundations of this family. A secret about an illegitimate son, an heir who was hidden for years to protect the Sterling reputation." A murmur of shock ran through the hall. The guests exchanged glances, some curious, others indignant. Richard, pale, looked at his mother, whose face was contorted in a mixture of fury and panic. "Veronica, I swear you will regret this," Eleanor hissed, trying to snatch the envelope from her hands. But Veronica was quicker. She opened the envelope and pulled out an old photograph, faded with time. It was the image of a young man, with the unmistakable features of the Sterlings, next to an unknown woman. And on the back of the photo, in elegant handwriting, the same as Horace's, it said, "My son, Daniel." "This is Daniel," Veronica announced, her voice triumphant. "The illegitimate son of Horace Sterling, Eleanor's half-brother, Richard's uncle, and he has lived his whole life without knowing his true family, while you all enjoyed this fortune." The hall fell into a deathly silence. The revelation hit everyone like a lightning bolt. The image of Horace, the upright and just patriarch, crumbled before everyone's eyes. Eleanor staggered, her face as white as a sheet. Richard looked at the photo, then at his mother, an expression of disbelief and betrayal on his face. Sophia, however, remained calm. She looked at the photo, then at Veronica, and a thought occurred to her. She had read Horace's diaries, she had studied his life, and something in Veronica's story didn't add up. "Veronica," Sophia said, her voice firm and clear, cutting through the silence. "You're mistaken, or perhaps you're trying to mislead all of us." All eyes turned to Sophia. Veronica stared at her, a scornful smile on her lips. "Mistaken? I have the proof, Sophia. Horace's handwriting, the photo, everything." "Yes, the handwriting is Horace's," Sophia agreed. "But the story you're telling is not the whole story. And I know this because I've read Horace's diaries. I know the truth about Daniel." Sophia's revelation left everyone in suspense. Veronica turned pale, a hint of fear in her eyes. Eleanor looked at Sophia, a spark of hope in her gaze. The hall was in an uproar. Veronica's accusation had cast a shadow over Horace Sterling's immaculate reputation, and the tension was palpable. All eyes were fixed on Sophia, who remained calm and serene despite the chaos. "Veronica," Sophia began, her voice resonating with authority, "you have a piece of the story, but not the whole truth. And the truth, as always, is far more complex than it seems." She turned to the audience, who listened with rapt attention. "Yes, it's true that Horace Sterling had a son out of wedlock. His name was Daniel. And yes, he was raised away from the family. But the story behind it is not one of shame or secrecy, but of love and profound sacrifice." Sophia paused, allowing her words to have the desired impact. Eleanor by her side held her hand, a mix of relief and apprehension on her face. Richard, still in shock, watched the scene, trying to absorb every word. "Horace Sterling was a man of principle, as you all know," Sophia continued, "but he was also a passionate man. Before marrying Richard's grandmother, he fell in love with a woman, a talented and free-spirited artist named Lucia. They lived an intense love affair, but Lucia, due to her independent nature, refused to marry and live under the social conventions of the time. She wanted to be free to create her art, to live her life without ties. From that love, Daniel was born. Lucia, by her own choice, decided to raise him alone, away from the society that would judge her. Horace, respecting her decision, offered all financial and emotional support but never forced her into anything. He visited Daniel secretly, watched him grow, followed his development. He loved him deeply." Sophia looked at the photo Veronica still held. "That photo, Veronica, is of Horace with Lucia and Daniel during one of their secret meetings. And the handwriting on the back, 'My son, Daniel,' is a declaration of love and acknowledgement, not of shame." Veronica tried to interrupt, but Sophia silenced her with a look. "It so happens that Lucia fell gravely ill when Daniel was still a child. She knew she didn't have much time left, and she made one last request to Horace that he find a family for Daniel, a family that could raise him with love and without the prejudices of society. She didn't want Daniel to be known as the illegitimate son of Horace Sterling, but as a free man, with his own identity. Horace, in an act of love and respect for Lucia's memory, granted her request. He found a loving family for Daniel, a family that raised him as their own son. He continued to support him financially, but always discreetly, respecting Lucia's wishes. Daniel grew up, became a talented artist, a renowned sculptor, living his life on his own terms, without ever knowing the truth about his origins. And Eleanor, Sophia continued, looking at the matriarch, she always knew about Daniel's existence. She was her father's only confidant in this matter, and she kept this secret, not out of shame, but out of loyalty to her father's memory and Lucia's wish. She protected Daniel's privacy, allowing him to live his life without the weight of the sterling name. A collective sigh of relief and admiration swept through the hall. Horace's story was not one of hypocrisy, but of deep love and silent sacrifice. The patriarch's reputation was intact, and the image of Eleanor, who had kept such a heavy secret for so long, grew in stature. Veronica, on the other hand, was in shock. Her plan had failed spectacularly. The bomb she intended to drop had backfired. She tried to compose herself, but Sophia's words had completely disarmed her narrative. "And you, Veronica," Sophia said, her voice now filled with unquestionable authority. "You used a story of love and sacrifice to try to destroy a family. You manipulated facts, distorted the truth, all for revenge and a petty desire to cause pain. You are not worthy of being in this house, nor of uttering the sterling name." Eleanor, recovered from the shock, stepped forward. "Security, remove this woman from here, and ensure she never sets foot on this property again, and if she tries anything else, Mr. Miller, please take the appropriate legal action." Veronica was escorted out of the hall under the contemptuous glares of the guests. Her exit was as humiliating as her entrance at the previous party, but this time there was no triumph in her eyes, only the bitterness of defeat. Richard, who had remained silent throughout the revelation, approached Sophia. His eyes were teary, but there was a new light in them, a glint of admiration and respect. "Sophia, I don't know what to say. You're incredible." Sophia smiled, a tired but victorious smile. "The truth always finds a way, Richard, and the truth about your grandfather is much more beautiful than any lie." The party, which had been interrupted by the scandal, resumed with a new spirit. The atmosphere was light, and the guests, now aware of the true story, looked at Sophia with even greater respect. She was not just the owner of the mansion, the manager of the empire. She was the guardian of the truth, the protector of the sterling legacy. Sophia's revelation about Daniel and the story of Horace and Lucia's love and sacrifice reverberated throughout society. The patriarch's image, which Veronica had tried to tarnish, emerged even stronger and more dignified. The charity event, which had nearly become a stage for scandal, ended with a sense of admiration and respect for Sophia and the Sterling family. The fundraising for Hope Ranch exceeded all expectations, boosted by the emotional response and the family's renewed perception of integrity. In the following days, the story of Daniel, Horace's secret son, became the main topic of the society columns. The media, which had previously speculated about the scandal, now praised Sophia's sensitivity in revealing the truth and Horace's nobility in protecting his son's privacy. Eleanor, relieved and proud, hugged Sophia. "You saved my father's honor, Sophia, and the honor of our family. I don't know how to thank you." "There's nothing to thank me for, Eleanor," Sophia replied. "The truth needed to be told, and Horace deserved to have his story told correctly." Richard, for his part, was deeply shaken by the revelation. He had grown up hearing stories about his grandfather's unwavering righteousness, and discovering that Horace had a son out of wedlock was a shock. But the way Sophia narrated the story with such affection and respect turned the shock into admiration. He realized his grandfather was a complex man, with passions and sacrifices, and that life was much more than appearances. "I never imagined Grandpa Horace had a story like that," Richard told Sophia in a moment of confidence. "He was always so reserved, so proper." "People are more complex than we imagine, Richard," Sophia replied, "and love often leads us down unexpected paths. What's important is how we handle those paths." The big question hanging in the air was, What would happen to Daniel? The media was in a frenzy, trying to locate him. Journalists and onlookers surrounded the mansion, hoping to get some information. Sophia, with Mr. Miller's help, took the initiative to find Daniel. She knew the public revelation could be a shock to him, and she wanted him to hear the truth from a reliable source, not from the newspapers. Mr. Miller, with his contacts, managed to locate Daniel in his studio in a small town upstate. Daniel was a man in his 50s, with graying hair and expressive eyes that resembled Horace's. He lived a simple life, dedicated to his art, oblivious to the world of wealth and intrigue of the Sterlings. When Mr. Miller approached him, Daniel was surprised, but agreed to meet with Sophia and Eleanor. The meeting took place at the mansion, in an atmosphere of discretion and respect. Daniel arrived, visibly apprehensive. Sophia greeted him with a warm smile, and Eleanor with a look of deep emotion. "Daniel," Sophia began, "I know this news must be a shock to you, but I wanted you to know the truth about your origins, not from the newspapers, but from us." Eleanor, her voice choked with emotion, added, "You are my brother, Daniel. My father loved you very much, and your mother, Lucia, was an extraordinary woman." Daniel listened to the story attentively, his eyes welling up. He had always known he was adopted, but his adoptive parents, simple and loving people, had never revealed the identity of his biological parents. The revelation that his father was Horace Sterling, such a respected name, and that his mother was an artist, left him speechless. I don't know what to say," Daniel said, finally. "It's a lot of information to process. I always felt a little different, a little out of place. Now I understand why." Sophia handed him Horace's diary and Lucia's letter, which she had found among the patriarch's belongings. "Here are your parents' words, Daniel. They might help you better understand your story." Daniel took the items with trembling hands. He leafed through the diary, recognizing Horace's handwriting, and felt an immediate connection to the man he had never known. "We don't want anything from you, Daniel," Eleanor said. "Just for you to know the truth, and for you to know that you are part of this family if you wish to be." Daniel looked at Sophia, then at Eleanor. He saw in their eyes not curiosity or judgment, but affection and respect. I need some time to process all this, but I thank you for telling me the truth and for giving me the chance to know my story." He stood up, still holding the diary and the letter. "I'd like to go back to my studio. I need some time to think." Sophia and Eleanor respected his decision. They knew the revelation was an earthquake in Daniel's life, and that he needed space to process everything. Richard, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, approached Daniel before he left. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Uncle Daniel. I'm sorry for everything." Daniel smiled, a gentle smile. "There's nothing to be sorry for, Richard. Life is like that, full of surprises." Daniel left, taking with him not only the diary and the letter, but also a new perspective on his life and his identity. The Sterling family had gained a new member, and Horace's story a new chapter. The revelation of Daniel's existence and the way Sophia handled the situation brought a new dimension to the Sterling family. The mansion, once a stage for intrigue and secrets, now seemed to breathe an atmosphere of transparency and acceptance. The story of Horace, Lucia, and Daniel became a reminder that life was more complex than appearances suggested, and that love in its various forms could transcend social conventions. Daniel, for his part, returned to his studio, taking with him Horace's diary and Lucia's letter. He isolated himself for a few days, immersing himself in the words of his biological parents. Horace's diary revealed a man of deep sensitivity who loved Lucia with an intensity he had never imagined. Lucia's letter, in turn, was a testament to her strength and her unconditional love for Daniel, explaining the difficult decision to give him up for adoption to ensure him a future free from prejudice. Reading these documents was a watershed moment for Daniel. He understood the complexity of the situation, the pain and love involved in his parents' decisions. The anger or resentment that might have arisen were replaced by a deep gratitude and a desire to get to know this family that had suddenly appeared in his life. A few weeks later, Daniel contacted Sophia. He wanted to visit them again, but this time not as a stranger, but as a family member. Sophia and Eleanor welcomed him with open arms. Richard, who had become a regular at Hope Ranch, was also present. The reunion was emotional. Daniel, with Horace's diary in hand, shared his impressions of the patriarch. "He was an incredible man," Daniel said, his eyes welling up. "I feel like I've known him my whole life, through his words." Eleanor, moved, hugged her brother. "He would be proud of you, Daniel. Of your art, of your life." Richard, who had spent his entire life in his grandfather's shadow, listened to Daniel's words with a new perspective. He realized that Horace was not just the ruthless businessman he knew, but a man with a rich and complex inner life. Daniel, in turn, was impressed with Richard's work at Hope Ranch. "It's a wonderful project, Richard. Your grandfather would have approved. It's a way of honoring his legacy, of using wealth for good." Slowly, Daniel began to integrate into the family. He didn't want the money or power of the Sterlings, but the connection, the sense of belonging. He started visiting the mansion regularly, sharing his experiences as an artist and listening to the family's stories. He became a bridge between the past and the present, a living reminder of the complexity and richness of the Sterling history. While the family adjusted to this new dynamic, Veronica, the cause of all the turmoil, had completely disappeared. The public humiliation at the party, the exposure of her malice, had made her a social pariah. No one wanted to be associated with her anymore. Her few contacts distanced themselves, and she found herself alone, without money and without prospects. She tried to get back on her feet, but the shadow of the Sterlings haunted her. She became a forgotten figure, a footnote in the family's history. Richard, for his part, continued his journey of redemption at Hope Ranch. The project was thriving, and he had become a respected leader, not only by the workers but also by the beneficiaries of the training center. He had found a purpose, a meaning for his life that went beyond money and status. The relationship between Sophia and Richard also deepened. Mutual respect had transformed into a solid friendship, and friendship into a renewed affection. They were not yet a couple in the traditional sense, but there was a connection, an understanding that went beyond words. They were partners, allies, and the mansion, which was once a stage for conflict, was now a home built on the foundation of truth and respect. One day Daniel, while visiting Hope Ranch, had an idea. "Sophia, Richard," he said, "I would like to create a sculpture for Hope Ranch, a work that represents the story of Horace, of Lucia, of all of us, a work that celebrates resilience, redemption, and the power of love." Sophia and Richard were moved by the proposal. Daniel's sculpture would be a symbol, a landmark of the new era of the Sterlings, an era of transparency, social responsibility, and acceptance. Daniel's proposal to create a sculpture for Hope Ranch was met with enthusiasm by Sophia and Richard. Eleanor, upon hearing the idea, was also moved. It was a way to immortalize the story of Horace, of Lucia, and all the complexity that surrounded the Sterling family. It would be a landmark, a symbol of the new era that Sophia was building. Daniel threw himself into the project. He spent weeks at Hope Ranch, observing the work, talking with the young apprentices, absorbing the energy of the place. He wanted the sculpture to be not just a work of art, but a reflection of that environment of transformation and hope. While Daniel worked on his creation, life at the mansion and at Hope Ranch continued its course. Sophia continued to expand the social projects, seeking new partnerships and investing in areas like education and health. Her leadership was increasingly recognized, and she became an influential figure in national philanthropy. Richard, for his part, had become Sophia's right-hand man in managing Hope Ranch. He supervised the construction, managed the resources, and, most importantly, inspired the young apprentices with his own story of redemption. He had found a purpose, and the satisfaction of seeing the positive impact of his work was his greatest reward. The relationship between him and Sophia had transformed into a solid partnership, based on respect, trust, and an affection that transcended expectations. Eleanor watched everything with a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. The Sterling family, which she had feared would fall apart, was stronger than ever, guided by the values that Horace had always cherished. Finally, the day of the sculpture's unveiling arrived. Hope Ranch was in a festive mood. Guests, officials, and the young apprentices gathered to witness the moment. The sculpture was covered by a cloth, creating an air of mystery and anticipation. When the cloth was removed, a collective gasp of admiration swept through the crowd. The sculpture was magnificent. It was an abstract composition, but deeply symbolic. At the center was a robust figure with deep roots, representing Horace, the patriarch who built the empire. From this central figure emerged two stems, one stronger and straighter, symbolizing Eleanor, the guardian of tradition, and another more sinuous and free, representing Lucia, the free-spirited artist. Between these two stems was a more delicate figure, but with an intrinsic strength that rose toward the sky, symbolizing Daniel, the son who found his place. And, enveloping all these figures, was an ascending spiral made of polished metal that reflected the sunlight, representing Sophia, the unifying force, the guardian of the legacy, who had brought light and hope to the family. At the base of the sculpture, Daniel had engraved a phrase taken from one of Horace's diaries: "The true legacy is not what one inherits, but what one builds with love and purpose." Emotion overcame everyone. Eleanor hugged Daniel, tears streaming down her face. Richard shook his uncle's hand, a sincere smile on his lips. Sophia, with teary eyes, looked at the sculpture, feeling a deep connection with each member of that family. "It's beautiful, Daniel," Sophia said, her voice choked. "It's perfect. It tells our story." Daniel smiled, a smile of satisfaction. "It tells the story of all of us, of how differences can come together to form something beautiful and meaningful." Daniel's sculpture became the heart of Hope Ranch, a constant reminder of the values the Sterling family represented. It symbolized unity, resilience, the ability to overcome, and the transformative power of love and purpose. From that day on, Hope Ranch was not just a training center, it was a sanctuary of hope, a place where lives were transformed, inspired by the story of a family that, despite its complexities, had found its way to redemption and unity. The unveiling of Daniel's sculpture marked a new chapter in the history of the Sterlings. Hope Ranch flourished, and the family's image, once associated with scandals and intrigue, was now synonymous with philanthropy and social responsibility. Sophia and Richard, working side by side, had built a solid partnership, and the mansion, once a stage for conflict, was now a home where harmony and purpose reigned. However, life, like a mighty river, never remains stagnant. New challenges arose on the horizon, testing the family's resilience and unity. The next major challenge came in the form of an economic crisis that began to plague the country. Inflation was soaring, interest rates were rising, and many companies, including some in the Sterling Group, began to feel the impact. Sophia, with her sharp mind and the guidance of Mr. Miller and Mr. Davis, acted quickly to protect the family's investments. She implemented cost-cutting measures, renegotiated contracts, and sought new market opportunities. Richard, with his practical experience at Hope Ranch, contributed innovative ideas to optimize resources and maintain productivity. Eleanor, with her vast experience and wisdom, was a pillar of support. She advised Sophia and Richard, reminding them of the difficult times Horace had faced and overcome. "My father always said that crises are disguised opportunities," she would say. "It is in times of difficulty that the true character of a person and a company is revealed." Despite their efforts, the crisis was severe. Some of the Sterling Group's companies, especially those in the construction sector, began to face financial difficulties. The pressure was immense, and Sophia felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She could not fail. Horace's legacy, the future of Hope Ranch, the livelihoods of hundreds of families depended on her decisions. Amidst this turmoil, a new character emerged, bringing with him a mix of hope and suspicion. It was Gregory Vance, a renowned financial consultant known for his ability to restructure companies in crisis. He was recommended by one of the family's oldest advisors, who described him as a financial wizard. Gregory was a charming man, with a sharp intellect and a magnetic presence. He quickly gained the trust of some board members, presenting bold plans and promises of a quick recovery. He seemed to be the solution to all their problems. Sophia, however, felt a pang of suspicion. Although Gregory's proposals were attractive, something about his demeanor bothered her. He was overly confident, and his solutions seemed too good to be true. She remembered Horace's words in his diary, "Beware of those who promise heaven without effort. True wealth is built with hard work and honesty." Richard, on the other hand, was more inclined to accept Gregory's proposals. He saw in the consultant a chance to relieve the pressure on Sophia and protect the family's assets. "Sophia, he seems to know what he's doing. Our companies are bleeding. We can't afford to be skeptical now." Eleanor, with her sharp intuition, also shared Sophia's concerns. "My father always said not to trust shortcuts, Sophia. The easiest path is not always the best." Sophia decided to investigate Gregory further. She asked Mr. Miller to do a complete background check on his professional and personal history. The lawyer, with his usual discretion, began to gather information. Meanwhile, Gregory intensified his presence in the family's life. He got closer to Sophia, praising her intelligence and strength, and insinuating that she was overwhelmed and needed someone to share the burden. He tried to undermine Sophia's confidence in her own decisions, suggesting she was too emotional to handle the coldness of the business world. The pressure on Sophia mounted. The economic crisis deepened, and Gregory's voice, promising quick solutions, became increasingly seductive to some board members. Sophia found herself at a crossroads: trust her intuition and risk the board's wrath, or give in to the pressure and hand control over to Gregory. She knew that the decision she made could define the future of the Sterlings, and she could not afford to be wrong. Gregory Vance's presence in the Sterlings' lives was like a dark cloud hanging over the mansion. His persuasive rhetoric and his promises of quick solutions to the economic crisis began to seduce the board members, who saw him as the salvation for the family's businesses. Sophia, however, remained firm in her suspicion, and Eleanor, with her ancestral wisdom, supported her unconditionally. Richard, though initially inclined to trust Gregory, began to watch the consultant more closely. He noticed the subtle way Gregory tried to isolate Sophia, undermining her authority and suggesting she was too inexperienced to handle the complexity of the crisis. This attitude set off an alarm in Richard, who had learned at his own cost the value of integrity and loyalty. Meanwhile, Mr. Miller worked tirelessly behind the scenes, investigating Gregory Vance's past. He delved into financial records, lawsuits, and old news articles, searching for any clue that could confirm Sophia's suspicions. The task was not easy, as Gregory was a master at covering his tracks, but Mr. Miller was an experienced and persistent professional. Finally, after weeks of investigation, Mr. Miller called Sophia, Eleanor, and Richard for an urgent meeting in the library. His face was serious, and in his hands he held a folder full of documents. "I have news about Mr. Gregory Vance," the lawyer began, his voice grave, "and it's not good." He revealed that Gregory Vance was not just a financial consultant. He was a corporate predator, specializing in infiltrating companies in crisis, undermining the board's confidence, and then orchestrating a hostile takeover, seizing control of the company for a fraction of its real value. He has a history of companies that, after his consulting, ended up bankrupt or sold at ridiculously low prices to investment groups linked to him, Mr. Miller explained. He uses the crisis as an opportunity to seize other people's assets. The folder contained detailed reports of previous cases, testimonies from former employees, and even some court rulings, although Gregory always managed to evade direct accusations by using shell companies and frontmen. "He was doing the exact same thing with the Sterlings," Mr. Miller continued. "He was undermining Sophia's authority, creating discord on the board, and preparing the ground for a maneuver that would allow him to take control of our most vulnerable companies." Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. Her intuition had been right. Gregory was not a savior, but a wolf in sheep's clothing. Richard, furious, slammed his fist on the table. "That bastard! I almost fell for his act." Eleanor, with her usual calm, asked, "And what can we do, Mr. Miller? How can we stop him?" "We need to expose him," the lawyer replied. "But we can't do it just any way. He's cunning and has many contacts. We need a strategy that catches him in the act, that reveals his intentions to the entire board and the media irrefutably. Sophia, her mind racing, began to devise a plan. She knew she had to act with intelligence and speed. Gregory had underestimated her, and she would use that to her advantage. "He's planning a meeting with the board next week," Sophia said. "He's going to present his final proposal for the restructuring of the companies. That's when we need to act." Sophia's plan was risky, but brilliant. She and Mr. Miller would set a trap for Gregory, using his own tactics against him. Richard would be a key part of this plan, acting as Gregory's ally to extract information and confirm his intentions. The tension in the mansion was palpable. The economic crisis continued to tighten its grip, and the threat of Gregory loomed over the family. But Sophia was no longer alone. She had the unconditional support of Eleanor, the expertise of Mr. Miller, and, most importantly, the loyalty and trust of Richard. The battle was about to begin, and Sophia was ready to fight for the Sterling legacy. Sophia's plan to unmask Gregory Vance was audacious and required flawless coordination. The board, meeting where Gregory would present his final restructuring proposal, would be the stage for the trap. Sophia, Eleanor, Richard, and Mr. Miller gathered in the library, meticulously planning every step. "Richard, your role will be crucial," Sophia explained. "You will continue to act as if you're on Gregory's side, appearing more and more convinced by his ideas. He needs to believe he has you in his pocket, that you're the weak link he can manipulate." Richard nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility. "I'll do whatever it takes, Sophia. That man is not going to destroy what my grandfather built." Mr. Miller detailed the technical part of the plan. "We're going to install hidden microphones and cameras in the boardroom. We need irrefutable proof of his intentions. Gregory is cunning. He won't leave a paper trail. We need to catch him, in his own words." Eleanor, with her experience in dealing with people, offered advice on handling Gregory's psychology. "He's a narcissist, Sophia. He feeds on the admiration and trust of others. Use that against him. Make him feel in control, invincible. The more secure he feels, the more careless he will become." In the days leading up to the meeting, Richard dedicated himself to his role with surprising commitment. He began spending time with Gregory, praising his ideas, expressing his concern over Sophia's slowness in making decisions. Gregory, his ego inflated, didn't see the trap. He saw Richard as an easy ally, a pawn to be used in his power play. Sophia, for her part, acted with calculated calm. She allowed Gregory to present his proposals, asked pointed questions, but never directly opposed him. She let him feel in command, while behind the scenes Mr. Miller and his team worked to install the recording equipment. The night of the board meeting arrived. The mansion's boardroom was impeccable, with the polished mahogany table and chairs arranged in a circle. The board members, some apprehensive, others hopeful, awaited the start of Gregory's presentation. Gregory Vance entered the room with a confident smile, exuding an aura of power and control. He greeted everyone with a firm handshake and a penetrating gaze. Sophia and Eleanor watched him with a neutral expression, while Richard at his side looked like a loyal ally. Gregory's presentation began. He used elaborate charts, optimistic projections, and convincing rhetoric to describe his restructuring plan. He spoke of the need to prune the dead branches, optimize assets, and ensure the survival of the Sterling companies. Between the lines, the message was clear. The companies needed to be sold, and he was the only one capable of doing it efficiently. Richard, at a key moment in the presentation, intervened. "Gregory, I completely agree with your vision, but, so we can convince the more skeptical members of the board, perhaps you could be more explicit about the investors you mentioned. Who are they? And what would be the real benefit for the Sterling family?" Gregory, feeling in control and believing Richard was just trying to help him consolidate his position, smiled. "Excellent question, Richard, and that's exactly why I value your insight. My investors are a select, trustworthy group who understand the intrinsic value of the Sterling assets. They are willing to make an offer that, while it may seem low at first glance, is the only guarantee that the family won't lose everything in the crisis." He then began to detail the terms of the offer, which included selling several companies of the group for well below market value, and transferring control to a consortium of shell companies, all linked to him. He spoke with growing arrogance, convinced he had won. It was at that moment that Sophia acted. She stood up, her voice calm but with unquestionable authority. "Mr. Vance, before we continue, I would like to present a small restructuring of your presentation," she signaled to Mr. Miller, who was sitting in a corner of the room. The lawyer, with a remote control in hand, pressed a button. Suddenly, the projection screen, which was displaying Gregory's charts, changed. Now, it showed a series of documents and audio recordings. The first recording was Gregory's voice, in a phone conversation detailing his plans for the hostile takeover of the Sterling companies and mocking Sophia's naivety and Richard's fragility. The second recording was a conversation with one of his investors, revealing the network of shell companies and the exorbitant profits they expected to make from the transaction. The shock in the room was palpable. The board members looked at Gregory, then at the screen, then at Sophia, with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Gregory, pale, tried to stand up, but Mr. Miller, with a stern look, stopped him. "Mr. Vance," Sophia said, her voice as cold as ice, "you are not a savior but a predator, and this family will not be your prey." Eleanor, with a look of contempt, added, "You underestimated Sophia's intelligence and the loyalty of this family. You made a fatal mistake." Gregory, defeated, realized he had fallen into his own trap. His arrogance had been his downfall. Mr. Miller then presented the irrefutable evidence of his illegal activities, including the reports from his investigation and the recordings. The boardroom, which Gregory had hoped to use for his victory, became the stage for his demise. The Sterling family had overcome another challenge, and Sophia had proven once again that she was the true guardian of Horace's legacy. The revelation of Gregory Vance's intentions at the board meeting was a devastating blow to the consultant and a triumph for Sophia and the Sterling family. The initial silence in the boardroom was quickly replaced by a wave of outrage and fury from the board members, who felt betrayed and manipulated. Gregory, pale and with sweat pouring down his face, tried to stammer some excuses, but his words were lost in the cacophony of accusations. Mr. Miller, with the folder of evidence in hand, gave him no quarter. He detailed every scheme, every shell company, every fraudulent transaction that Gregory had orchestrated in other companies, and was now trying to replicate with the Sterlings. "Gentlemen," Mr. Miller said, his voice firm and clear, "the evidence is irrefutable. Mr. Vance is not a consultant but a criminal, and he will be held accountable for his actions." Eleanor, with a look of contempt, ordered the security guards to remove Gregory from the mansion. "This man is not worthy of setting foot on Sterling ground. Let him be handed over to the proper authorities." Gregory Vance was escorted out under the disgusted glares of everyone. His career, his reputation, everything he had built on a foundation of fraud and manipulation crumbled in a matter of minutes. In the following days, the news of the Gregory Vance scandal spread like wildfire. The media, which had once praised him as a financial wizard, now exposed him as a con artist. The companies he had previously harmed, encouraged by Sophia's courage, began to come forward, and an avalanche of lawsuits rained down on him. Gregory Vance would face not only criminal justice, but also a series of civil actions that would lead him to financial ruin and prison. The Sterling family, for their part, emerged from the crisis even stronger and more united. Sophia's leadership was acclaimed by all. She had proven her intelligence, her courage, and her integrity. The board, once divided, was now cohesive and loyal to her. Richard, who had played a crucial role in the trap, felt a genuine pride for Sophia. He had seen firsthand the coldness and cruelty of Gregory, and the way Sophia unmasked him with intelligence and dignity filled him with admiration. Their partnership solidified even further, and their mutual trust grew with each passing day. The economics crisis, though still present, seemed less daunting. Sophia, with the support of Mr. Miller and Mr. Davis, implemented a solid and transparent recovery plan. She renegotiated debts, sought new markets, and invested in innovative technologies. Hope Ranch, under Richard's management, continued to thrive, becoming a model of social responsibility and sustainability. Daniel, the artist uncle, also contributed to the family's recovery. He used his influence in the art world to attract investors and sponsors for the Sterling's social projects. His sculpture at Hope Ranch became a tourist attraction, drawing visitors and generating income for the community. The Sterling mansion, which had witnessed so many dramas and twists, was now a symbol of resilience and renewal. The family, which had seemed destined to disintegrate, had found a new purpose, a new identity, built on the pillars of truth, integrity, and love. Sophia, sitting in the library, leafed through Horace's diary. The patriarch's words, which once seemed like a burden, were now an inspiration. She had fulfilled her promise, not only protecting the Sterling's financial legacy, but also honoring their values and principles. Eleanor entered the library, a serene smile on her face. "You did a wonderful job, my dear. Horace would be very proud." "We did, Eleanor," Sophia replied, looking at the matriarch. "We did it together." Life in the mansion continued its course, but with a new energy. The economic crisis was still a challenge, but the Sterling family was prepared to face it, united and strengthened. The future was uncertain, but Sophia's hope and determination were unshakable. Overcoming the crisis with Gregory Vance and the consolidation of Sophia's leadership brought a new phase of stability and purpose to the Sterling family. The mansion, once a stage for intrigue, was now a center for strategic decisions and a welcoming home. The partnership between Sophia and Richard deepened, and the presence of Eleanor and Daniel brought a wealth of perspectives and support. However, Sophia knew that the permanence of a legacy was not guaranteed just by overcoming isolated crises. It was necessary to look to the future, prepare the next generations, and institutionalize the values that Horace held so dear. She felt the responsibility to ensure that the Sterling story continued to be written with integrity and social impact. Her next step was the creation of the Horace Sterling Foundation. The idea was to transform the social projects, which were previously isolated initiatives, into a formal and enduring structure, with its own governance and dedicated resources. The foundation would be the family's philanthropic arm, focused on education, vocational training, and community development, mirroring the ideals that Horace had cultivated. Sophia presented the idea to Eleanor, Richard, and Daniel. They all embraced the proposal with enthusiasm. Eleanor saw the foundation as a way to immortalize her father's memory and ensure his values were passed on. Richard, with his experience at Hope Ranch, would be the chairman of the foundation's executive board, applying his practical knowledge to the management of the projects. Daniel, with his artistic sensibility and worldview, would be an advisor, helping to integrate art and culture into the foundation's initiatives. Mr. Miller was tasked with all the legal and bureaucratic aspects of creating the foundation. He worked tirelessly to ensure the structure was solid, transparent, and proof against future manipulations. The Horace Sterling Foundation was launched at a grand event, which brought together community leaders, business people, and government representatives. Sophia, in her speech, spoke about the importance of using wealth for the common good, about the social responsibility of large corporations, and about Horace's legacy, which she pledged to honor. "This foundation," Sophia said, her voice emotional, "is not just a tribute to Horace Sterling. It is a commitment to the future. It is our way of ensuring that the prosperity we have built is shared, that opportunities are extended to all, and that hope continues to flourish in our communities." Hope Ranch became the flagship of the foundation, a model of success that would be replicated in other regions. Richard, with his inspiring leadership, transformed the lives of hundreds of young people, offering them not only vocational training, but also a sense of purpose and dignity. The relationship between Sophia and Richard, which had been strengthened through adversity, evolved into something deeper. They were not just business partners, but life partners, united by a common purpose. The mansion, once a symbol of an arranged marriage, was now the home of a family that had rebuilt itself on the foundation of respect, admiration, and love. One day, as they walked through the mansion's gardens, Richard took Sophia's hand. "Sophia," he said, his voice soft, "I know our story didn't start in the most conventional way, but I'm grateful for every twist, for every challenge, because it was through them that I discovered who you really are, and it was through you that I discovered who I could be." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining. "Our story is still being written, Richard, and I'm happy we're writing it together." The Sterling's life continued, with its challenges and its victories, but now they were prepared to face them, not as isolated individuals, but as a united family, guided by Horace's values and Sophia's vision. The patriarch's legacy was secure and the future promising. The Horace Sterling Foundation became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of redemption and the human capacity to turn adversity into opportunity. And Sophia, the bookworm no one expected, had become the true matriarch, the guardian of a legacy that transcended time and generations. The Horace Sterling Foundation flourished, and with it, the family's reputation and social impact. Sophia, as president of the foundation and CEO of the business group, masterfully balanced her responsibilities, always with the unconditional support of Eleanor, Richard, and Daniel. The mansion, once a symbol of power and tradition, now radiated a new kind of influence, that of purpose and transformation. Sophia and Richard's professional lives were on a steep ascent, but their personal lives, which had been so tumultuous, found a new rhythm. The partnership forged in adversity had deepened into a mutual affection and respect that transcended the formalities of an arranged marriage. Conversations about business and social projects often extended into more intimate reflections about their dreams, fears, and the future they wished to build. One day, as they walked through the mansion's gardens after a long foundation meeting, Richard stopped and turned to Sophia. The golden afternoon sun enveloped them, and the air was fragrant with the scent of roses. "Sophia," he began, his voice a little softer than usual, "I know our story didn't start like a fairy tale, and that for us, love was something we built, brick by brick, through many storms." Sophia looked at him, feeling her heart race. There was an intensity in Richard's gaze she hadn't seen in a long time, a vulnerability that touched her deeply. "I was a lost man, Sophia," he continued, his eyes fixed on hers, blinded by arrogance, by privilege, by superficiality. "You and my grandfather's legacy showed me a different path. You taught me the value of work, of integrity, of purpose. You made me want to be a better man." He took a step forward, taking Sophia's hands. "I don't know if I deserve it after everything I put you through, but I can no longer imagine my life without you. Not just as my business partner, but as my companion, my friend, the woman who inspires me every day." Sophia felt tears welling up in her eyes. Richard's words were sincere, stripped of any artifice. This was the man she had helped shape, the man who had found his own redemption. "I love you, Sophia," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I love you in a way I never knew it was possible to love, and I want to build a life with you, a real life of love, of partnership. Would you give me a second chance? Not as the husband the will imposed on me, but as the man I've become, who chooses you every day." Sophia couldn't hold back her tears. This was the moment she had wished for in her most secret dreams. Not the overwhelming passion of a movie romance, but a love built on the rock of overcoming, of respect, and of mutual admiration. "Yes, Richard," she replied, her voice choked. "Yes, I will. I love you too." They embraced, a hug that sealed not just a new beginning for their marriage, but the celebration of a journey of transformation. The kiss that followed was different from all the others. It was not a kiss of obligation, nor of fleeting passion, but a kiss of mature love, of complicity, and of a shared future. The news of Sophia and Richard's new marriage, now by choice and love, not by imposition, was received with joy by Eleanor and Daniel. The family, which had been through so many trials, finally found its completeness. Life at the Sterling mansion continued, but with a new light. Sophia and Richard together not only managed an empire and a foundation, but built a home, a family, a legacy of love and purpose that would extend for generations. They became an example that love can flourish in the most unexpected places, and that redemption is always possible for those who are willing to change. Sophia and Richard's new marriage, sealed not by a will, but by a love matured through trials, marked the beginning of a golden era for the Sterling family. The mansion, once a stage for drama and twists, now radiated an energy of unity and purpose. The news of their union, celebrated in an intimate and emotional ceremony in the mansion's gardens, was received with joy by all who followed the family's journey. Sophia and Richard, now more than ever, were an unstoppable force. The Horace Sterling Foundation prospered under Richard's leadership as he dedicated himself with passion to social projects, expanding the reach of Hope Ranch and creating new initiatives in education and health. Sophia, for her part, remained at the helm of the business group, masterfully navigating the complexities of the market and ensuring the financial stability that sustained the family's legacy. Eleanor, with a glint of satisfaction in her eyes, watched her children, for Sophia had become a daughter to her, build a promising future. She devoted herself to caring for her grandchildren, who began to arrive, bringing new joy and vitality to the mansion. The first was a boy, with Sophia's curious eyes and Richard's captivating smile, whom they named Horace, in honor of the patriarch who in a way had orchestrated everything. Daniel, the artist uncle, became a beloved figure in the family. His visits were always eagerly awaited, and his conversations, filled with wisdom and sensitivity, enriched everyone. He continued to create his sculptures, many of them inspired by the Sterling history, and his art became a link between the family's past and present. The Sterling family, which had once been on the brink of ruin, had risen again, stronger and more united than ever. They became an example that redemption is possible, that love can flourish in the most unexpected places, and that a true legacy is built not just with wealth, but with values, purpose, and above all with people. The years passed, and the Sterling mansion continued to be the heart of the family. The children grew up, the foundation's projects expanded, and the business group solidified its position as one of the most respected in the country. Sophia and Richard, growing old together, looked back with gratitude and toward the future with hope. They had learned that life is a journey of constant learning, of challenges and triumphs. That true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in relationships, in values, and in the positive impact one leaves on the world. On a sunny afternoon, sitting on the mansion's veranda, watching their grandchildren play in the gardens, Sophia and Richard exchanged a look that contained the entire history they had lived, all the battles they had fought, and all the love they had built. "Who would have thought, Richard," Sophia said with a smile, "that the bookworm and the prodigal heir would build all this?" Richard squeezed her hand. "Who would have thought, Sophia? Who would have thought that fate would bring us together in such an unexpected way? And that love would give us a second chance to rewrite our story. The story of the Sterlings, which began with a will and an imposition, had transformed into an epic of love, redemption, and purpose. And Horace's legacy, which he had striven so hard to protect, was not only secure but flourishing in the hands of a family that had learned the true meaning of being a Sterling. And so the saga of the Sterlings continued, with new chapters being written every day by every member of the family, under the light of a love that had surpassed all expectations. Sophia's question about what the future held for the Sterling family, now united by love and purpose, echoed in the air, promising new horizons. And indeed, life at the mansion and in the family's businesses did not stagnate. On the contrary, the union of Sophia and Richard, solidified by love and a shared vision, propelled the family to even greater heights of influence and impact. The years that followed were marked by sustainable and innovative growth. The Horace Sterling Foundation, under Richard's leadership, expanded beyond the state's borders, becoming a national benchmark for community development. Hope Ranch, once a pilot project, transformed into an educational and productive complex, with technical courses that trained young people in various fields, from sustainable agriculture to information technology. Daniel's sculpture at the center of the complex became a symbol of inspiration for all who passed through. Sophia, at the helm of the business group, demonstrated a visionary capacity for business. She not only consolidated the existing companies, but also invested in new sectors, such as renewable energy and green technology, aligning profits with environmental and social responsibility. Her reputation as an ethical and innovative leader grew exponentially, and she began to be invited to speak at international forums, sharing the Sterling's success story. Eleanor, as the years went by, took on a more contemplative but no less important role. She became the guardian of the family's memory, sharing stories of Horace and Lucia with her grandchildren, who were growing up in the mansion. Little Horace, Sophia and Richard's firstborn, showed from an early age a sharp curiosity and a sense of justice that was very reminiscent of his great-grandfather. He spent hours in the library, leafing through Horace's diaries, and accompanied Richard on visits to Hope Ranch, absorbing every lesson. Daniel, the artist uncle, continued to be a constant and inspiring presence. His works, increasingly renowned, were frequently exhibited in prestigious galleries, and he dedicated part of his time to mentoring young artists from the foundation, encouraging them to express their voices and their stories through art. The Sterling Mansion, once a stage for secrets and conflicts, transformed into a vibrant home, filled with the laughter of children, intellectual discussions and family celebrations. Meals at the large table were moments of unity, where different generations met, sharing experiences and planning the future. Sophia and Richard, now with silver-streaked hair, looked at the empire they had built together, not just of material goods, but of values and a human legacy. They had proven that love, integrity, and purpose were the true pillars of a lasting family and business. One Christmas evening, with the mansion lit up and the family gathered around the fireplace, Sophia took Richard's hand. "We did a good job, didn't we, my love?" she whispered, watching their children and grandchildren. Richard smiled, a smile that reflected the entire journey they had traveled. "More than a good job, Sophia. We built a life that Horace would be proud to call his own." The story of the Sterlings was not just about inheritance and fortune, but about the ability to reinvent oneself, to learn from mistakes, to forgive, and to love. It was the story of how a bookworm and a prodigal heir came together to rewrite a family's destiny, transforming a legacy of power into a legacy of purpose and hope. And so, the saga of the Sterlings continued, with the new generations ready to take up the mantle, inspired by the story of their ancestors and the vision of a future built on the solid foundation of love and integrity. The question about the closing of the narrative arcs resonated with Sophia, even if only in her mind. She knew that in real life, stories rarely have a definitive endpoint. There is always a new chapter, a new challenge, a new opportunity for growth. And the saga of the Sterlings, with its wealth of characters and twists, would be no different. The years had passed, and the mansion, which once seemed like a soap opera set, was now a vibrant home, full of life and laughter. Horace, Sophia and Richard's firstborn, was already a young adult, with his mother's sharp intelligence and his father's passion for social work. He was preparing to take on a leadership role in the foundation, but with his own vision, shaped by his generation. However, not everything was a bed of roses. The permanence of a legacy, as Sophia well knew, required constant vigilance. The rise of the Horace Sterling Foundation and the success of the business group inevitably attracted new eyes and new ambitions. One of these came from an international conglomerate, Global Corp, led by a ruthless and unscrupulous figure, CEO Maximilian Thorne. Thorne was known for his hostile takeovers and for dismantling traditional companies to maximize profits without any regard for legacies or social responsibility. He saw the Sterling Group as a ripe target, with valuable assets and a foundation that, in his view, was an unnecessary cost. Thorne's first move was subtle. He began buying shares of the Sterling Group on the market discreetly through shell companies. At the same time, his public relations team began to spread rumors about the obsolescence of the Sterling's management methods and the inefficiency of the foundation, trying to undermine the confidence of minority shareholders. Sophia and Richard, with the experience of past battles, noticed the signs. Mr. Miller, ever vigilant, confirmed their suspicions. Maximilian Thorne was preparing for a hostile takeover, and his goal was clear: to dismantle the Sterling Group, sell its most profitable assets, and likely shut down the foundation. The news shook the family. Eleanor, though older, felt the same fury she had felt when facing Veronica and Gregory. Daniel, with his artistic sensibility, saw the threat as an attack on the very soul of the family, on its identity. Horace, the young heir, felt the weight of responsibility. He had grown up hearing the stories of his grandfather and his parents, and now it was his turn to fight for the legacy. He approached Sophia and Richard, determined to contribute. "We can't let him destroy everything we've built," Horace said, with a passion that recalled his father's in his best moments. "The foundation, the projects, the people who depend on us. We can't give up." Sophia, with her usual calm, but with a steely determination in her eyes, gathered the family. "We will not give up. We have faced greater adversities, and we came out stronger. Thorn underestimates our unity and our purpose." Thorn's strategy was based on disunity and greed. He would try to buy out the minority shareholders, divide the board, and finally, force a sale. But Sophia knew that the Sterling's strength was not just in their financial assets, but in their values and their ability to unite in times of crisis. Richard, with his experience in dealing with people and his passion for the foundation, would be essential in mobilizing the employees and the community. Daniel, with his network of contacts and his communication skills, would help expose Thorn's true intentions to the public. And Horace, with his energy and his vision for the future, would bring new ideas and strategies to the battle. The fight against Maximilian Thorn would be different from the previous ones. It would not just be a matter of unmasking a con artist, but of defending a legacy, a business philosophy, and a model of social responsibility against the coldness of predatory capitalism. The Sterling family was about to face its greatest challenge, but they were united, and that, Sophia knew, was their greatest strength. The threat of Maximilian Thorn and Global Corp loomed like a shadow over the Sterling mansion. This time, the enemy was not an isolated con artist, but a gigantic corporation with unlimited resources and a business philosophy that clashed with everything the family had built. Sophia knew the battle would be the toughest yet, but the family's unity was their greatest weapon. Sophia's strategy to counter Thorn was multifaceted and bold. First, she called an emergency board meeting, presenting the evidence collected by Mr. Miller on Global Corp's predatory tactics in other acquisitions. She exposed how Thorn dismantled companies, laid off employees en masse, and ignored any social commitment. The clarity and coldness of the facts shocked the board members, who, though concerned about the crisis, did not want to be complicit in such destruction. In parallel, Richard and Horace, with Daniel's support, mobilized the community. Richard, with his passion and charisma, organized events at Hope Ranch, bringing together the beneficiaries of the social projects, the employees of the group's companies, and the local population. He spoke of Horace's legacy, of the positive impact the Sterlings had on the lives of thousands of people, and of the threat that Global Corp posed to all of it. Daniel, with his artistic sensibility, created a series of installations and performances that denounced corporate dehumanization and celebrated the community's resilience. The local and then national media began to cover the mobilization, turning the Sterling's fight into a public cause. Thorn, accustomed to dealing with numbers and spreadsheets, was caught off guard by the emotional and social reaction. His lawyers and press advisors tried to discredit the family, but the community's voice was stronger. Global Corp's image began to be tarnished, and its investors, concerned about the negative backlash, started to question the acquisition. Sophia's final move came at a shareholders' meeting, called to vote on Global Corp's acquisition proposal. Thorn was present, exuding his usual arrogance. He presented his arguments, promising exorbitant profits and a modernization of the Sterling Group. When it was Sophia's turn, she didn't talk about numbers or financial strategies. She talked about people. She projected images of Hope Ranch onto the screen, of the young apprentices, of the families that had been transformed by the Foundation's projects. She showed emotional testimonies from employees who had dedicated their lives to the Sterling companies and now feared losing their jobs and their dignity. "Shareholders," Sophia said, her voice choked but firm. "The Sterling Group is not just a collection of financial assets. It is a family. It is a community. It is the legacy of Horace, a man who believed that the true value of a company lies not just in its profit, but in the impact it has on people's lives. She looked directly at Thorn. You, Maximilian Thorn, see only numbers. We see faces. You see profit. We see purpose. You want to dismantle. We want to build. The emotion in the room was palpable. Many shareholders who had previously been inclined to sell their shares began to reconsider. It was then that Eleanor, with her unwavering dignity, stood up. My father, Horace Sterling, built this empire with sweat and honesty. He believed in the value of work and social responsibility. We will not allow a man without scruples to destroy what he spent a lifetime building. The vote was close, but in the end, Global Corp's acquisition proposal was rejected. The family's unity, the community's mobilization, and Sophia's passion had prevailed over greed and corporate coldness. Thorn, defeated and humiliated, left the room, his image as a corporate predator forever stained. The victory was celebrated with euphoria at the mansion. The Sterling family had overcome its greatest challenge and emerged even stronger, more united and more aware of its purpose. Horace, the young heir, had found his voice and his place in the family. Richard and Sophia, side by side, had proven that love and integrity were the true currencies of a lasting legacy. The years that followed were of prosperity and innovation. The Sterling Group, under the leadership of Sophia and Richard, continued to grow, always with a strong social and environmental commitment. The Horace Sterling Foundation became a global model of philanthropy, and the mansion, a symbol of resilience and hope. The story of the Sterlings, which began with a will and an imposition, had transformed into an epic of love, redemption, and purpose. And Horace's legacy, which he had striven so hard to protect, was not only secure but flourishing in the hands of a family that had learned the true meaning of being a Sterling. End of story. Hey everyone, what did you think of this incredible journey of the Sterling family? From the unexpected will that brought Sophia and Richard together, through the schemes of Veronica and Gregory Vance, to the thrilling fight against Global Corp, this story showed us that love, integrity, and purpose are the true pillars of a lasting legacy. We followed Richard's redemption, Sophia's rise as a visionary leader, Eleanor's wisdom, and Daniel's sensitivity. Every chapter was a roller coaster of emotions and lessons. If you were moved, cheered, and inspired by the Sterling saga, don't forget to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories, and hit the notification bell to get notified. We want to know what you thought of every twist and turn. So leave your comment below and share this story with your friends and family. And if you're looking for more engaging and impactful narratives, check out the playlist on the left with other incredible stories we've prepared for you. There's a lot of excitement waiting. See you next time.